Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Became Temari's Hero Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Naruto, you can't let him have it. Sensei, you know I respect your decisions and everything that you've taught us in the past, but I now find myself wondering if you haven't gone senile. Your concerns for my mental well-being are duly noted and duly ignored, Kankuro, Baki calmly stated. But come on, the boy complained, pacing back and forth around the living room area in aggravation. You made that guy a genin. And to top it off, you put him on our team. He does have a bit of a point, Baki-sensei, Temari commented from her spot on the couch. After all, genin teams are only supposed to have 3 members and a junin. And it just wouldn't be fair to make Kankuro leave just to make room for Naruto. Exactly. Kankuro nodded. And not only that, wait, what? What do you mean, make Kankuro leave? Well, it's obvious, Temari stated as though it were written on the walls. You're the weakest link of our team. Weakest link, my face paint. He retorted. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're better than me. Being older doesn't mean it, she admitted. But my 97 sparring victories over you certainly do. How many times have you gotten the better of me? Quote. I've lost count. Then you certainly can't count very high. Baki stood back, resting against the wall as he watched the exchange in annoyance. This is why he'd never had children. Having already taught the two for some time now, he'd learned that it was simply easier to let them get their squabbling out of their system, otherwise they wouldn't be willing to listen to anything he tried to tell them. Hearing the break in the bickering, he felt it safe to speak up. If we could get back to the matter at hand, please. Kankuro shot one last dirty look at his sister before turning back to his sensei. What's up with our old man? The last time a ninja from another country came to live in Suna, he got so paranoid that he wanted the guy executed. Now he's taking this idiot nobody in as a shinobi. He snapped his fingers. Just like that. In case you forgot, Kankuro, the Junin said with a slight edge to his voice. That idiot nobody just survived a fatal encounter with your brother. Only because you bailed him out. He has also shown himself to be an expert at cage bunshin. Creating as many as he did all at once would require an enormous amount of chakra. I don't think I could create that many. The puppet master just snorted. Ah, who needs bunshins anyway? Karasu's more reliable than that. Baki sighed. What he wouldn't give for a group of not so stubborn students. Begrudgingly, he turned his attention to Temari. You've been fairly quiet, Temari. Do you have any objections to letting Uzumaki join you? Temari shrugged. I don't know. I guess, as long as he doesn't slow us down or start messing things up for us, I don't really mind. Of course you don't, Kankuro grumbled. What more convenient way to spend time with the only guy who's ever paid you a compliment? Would you stop swinging that thing at me? Temari leaned back on the couch again, glaring at her brother and keeping a firm grin on her fan. Feeling that he was out of danger for the moment, Kankuro went back to complaining. And what about Gaara? How can you expect to put that guy on our team and have Gaara be okay with it after what just happened? That would be the sticking point, Baki admitted to himself. I'm afraid the best we can do for that is keep Gaara calm and convince him not to try killing the boy again. Yeah, that'll work, Kankuro replied, rolling his eyes. We'd have a better chance at convincing the sun to start rising in the north. If Gaara wants to kill him, you really think we're gonna be able to keep him from doing it? Keep me from killing who? Everyone tensed, and turned to the hallway where Gaara was now standing. Temari suddenly found something very interesting to look at on the floor, and Kankuro began focusing intently on rubbing out a non-existent stain from his shirt. Baki, realizing he was once again stuck with dealing with the boy, sighed and moved to the middle of the room. Gaara, the boy from earlier, Uzumaki Naruto, is going to be training in our group from now on. Gaara's blank stare gave nothing away of what he was thinking. Quote. Is Kankuro leaving? Now that is not funny. Kankuro yelled, ignoring the stifled laughter from Temari. And what makes it worse is that I'm 100% certain that he's not trying to make a joke. Nobody is leaving, Gaara, Baki answered. He will be joining the three of you as a 4-person team at least until we can determine how well his abilities will be able to aid us. Can I trust you to refrain from any further attempts at killing him while he remains with us? No, you cannot, Gaara answered bluntly. I'll kill him if the urge arises. If you impede me again, then I'll kill you as well. Baki, Temari and Kankuro all flinched at the boy's dangerous tone. They'd been hearing it for close to 6 years now, but it never stopped from terrifying them. And just as the tension in the room reached its highest, the front door opened. Hey, Baka-sensei, Naruto shouted as he dashed into the room. Did I make it back in time? It hasn't been a full hour yet, has it? With a collective gulp, the others turned from Naruto to Gaara, waiting to see what might happen. Naruto, noticing that the others had turned from him, also noticed Gaara at the other end of the room and recoiled. You again. Look, I don't know what your problem was with me before, but I don't want to fight you again if I don't have to, okay? We're supposed to be on the same team now, but that won't stop me from finishing the ass kicking I was about to give MMPH. The blonde found his speech cut off as both Temari and Kankuro had slapped their hands tightly over his mouth. Are you insane? Kankuro whispered frantically to him, glancing back and hoping to God that Gaara wasn't about to snap. Gaara just stared, however. His normally stoic glare was marred by a slight look of confusion. You have seen my abilities, and you know that they are far greater than your own. Why don't you fear me? Naruto struggled away from the clutches of Gaara's siblings. Why should I? He demanded. Just because you can control sand doesn't mean you're better than me. I'll figure out how to get past it, and then I'll beat you and anyone else who thinks they can stop me from achieving my goals. And you'd better believe it, or my name isn't Uzumaki Naruto. Silence fell over the room as 3 of the 5 occupants waited with bated breath. Gaara's eyes never broke away from Naruto's. You interest me, Uzumaki Naruto, he said. I wonder, though, how long will it take for your foolish bravery to crumble away to terror? Slowly, he turned and began ascending the stairway back up to the roof. Soon, Uzumaki Naruto, I will paint the desert sands red with your blood. Naruto growled as Gaara disappeared from sight. Geez, what the heck's with that guy? He never saw the blow coming, only felt a brief pain in the back of his head before falling to the ground unconscious. A seething Kankuro tossed the giant fan back to Temari, who looked very cross at having it ripped out of her hands. The puppet master turned a vicious glare at Baki. This is the guy you want on our team. He's going to get us all killed. Calm down, Kankuro. Calm down. How the hell do you expect me to calm down in a situation like this? Even you were 2 seconds away from jumping out the window and running for your life. Baki shook his head. Listen to me, Kankuro. Naruto is not from Suna, and he knows nothing about the Shukaku. With time Naruto will grow accustomed to how things are here, until then we simply have to keep him from further provoking Gaara. Temari fell onto the couch and put her head in her hands. Baki-sensei, I'm all for giving this kid the benefit of the doubt, but why are you and Dad so gung-ho about it? It doesn't make any sense that he would be given such acceptance so quickly by either of you. Baki frowned. I'm afraid that is something that I cannot share with you yet, Temari. However, there is something special in Naruto, and we believe that with the proper training, he could become even greater than Gaara. The children stared at him like his skin had turned purple. Kankuro let out a tired sigh. Look sensei, it's late and I'm way too exhausted for jokes right now. So you go ahead and do what you want with the idiot, I'm going to bed. And just remember, if Gaara goes ballistic and kills us all because of him, I'm hereby reserving the right to spend eternity in our afterlife saying, I told you so. After Kankuro walked off to his own room, Baki turned to Temari, who was in turn staring at the unconscious boy before her. Stronger than Gaara? She asked, sounding very unconvinced. Baki nodded. That's why I need your help in keeping Gaara calm around him. If we can just build up his abilities, he could soon become one of Suna's greatest assets. Another silence passed over the room as Temari tried to take in everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Ever since they had found the boy half dead in the desert, nothing was making sense anymore. I'll take the boy with me until we can find a suitable place for him, the Junin said as he lifted the boy and tucked him under his arm. All things considered, I don't think it would be wise to leave him here. He turned to leave. Don't forget, meet at the usual training grounds at 8 tomorrow morning. Temari nodded. Now all alone, she laid back on the couch and gazed at the ceiling, wondering what other surprises her new teammate might bring in the days to come, assuming he lived that long, of course. Uzumaki Naruto, she whispered. She still had no idea what Baki and her dad had seen in him that she must have missed, but she vowed then and there that she would do whatever it took to figure out what it was. Naruto awoke with a splitting headache. For several minutes he laid where he was, waiting for the throbbing in his head to subside. When it eventually did, he opened his eyes to find himself in an unfamiliar room. There was no light coming through the open window, but he could still make out the interior of the room. There really wasn't much to look at. He found himself lying on a small bed with plain white sheets. There was a small dresser in one corner next to a door that led somewhere, and a small desk with a lamp sitting next to the bed. Reaching over, he pulled the lamp string, bathing the room in a dim light. Taking another look around the room to see if he'd overlooked anything, he spotted a folded slip of paper resting against the base of the lamp. Picking it up, he unfolded it and scanned the words written inside. Naruto. This will be your room until further arrangements can be made. If you find this before morning, I advise you to rest well as our first training session will be at 8 o'clock at the Northern Training Grounds. I look forward to seeing more of your skills. On a far more serious note, I am instructing you to avoid Gaara as much as humanly possible. When we are not training as a group, you are to refrain from approaching him, speaking with him, and above all, provoking him. I realize that you have your pride as a young shinobi, but you must understand when I tell you that you cannot hope to defeat Gaara in battle. Not even I am able to accomplish such a thing, and angering Gaara further will only result in more bloodshed within our village. So for the sake of the village and everyone in it, keep a low profile where Gaara is concerned. Baki. Naruto placed the letter back on the desk, lost deep in thought. After such a weird day, there were so many questions he still wanted to ask about. He thought about his new team members. Temari was nice, probably the nicest of the group, even if she did seem a bit short-tempered. At least she had taken the time to get to know him a little, and she had even sympathized with him when she learned about his leaving of Konoha. Kankuro was a jerk, and he didn't have much doubt that it had been him who'd knocked him out earlier. But, like it or not, they were teammates now, and Naruto wasn't going to blow his chances of proving himself to the Kazekage and the rest of Suna just because he didn't get along with him. That brought him to Gaara. This guy was a freak, plain and simple. Naruto had never known anyone, especially not someone the same age as he, who could so easily talk about killing people and be so descriptive about it. It just wasn't natural. He thought back to what Temari had told him at the hospital. She had said something about noticing the signs of someone who had gone through life unloved like he had. She said she hadn't been talking about herself. Was it possible she meant Gaara? That made him think of their fight that day, and how the villagers had called Gaara a monster and a demon. He yawned deeply. He still had plenty of thinking to do, but it would have to wait until tomorrow after some much-needed sleep. A sewer again. On one side, the long narrow corridors that twisted and turned in a seemingly never-ending fashion. On the other side, the giant prison cell that any normal person could have easily slipped through and escaped, which of course was not the case for the creature that it contained. A pair of blazing red eyes appeared from behind the bars of the cell, gazing down at the boy with an unearthly hatred. Back again, the demon growled. I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. It's not like I'm here on purpose. Naruto shouted at him. I just fell asleep and now I'm here. Well, go away. I don't like looking at you. Naruto crossed his arms and stuck his tongue out at the demon. Make me. We're still in my body, so I'll go wherever I want. That phony arrogance of yours is sickening, said the beast. He swiped one of his many tails against the cell door, causing a loud clang and a small rumbling, but still the seal held. You can't even handle that weakling Shukaku, and yet you put on an act before me because this seal keeps us apart. Naruto paused. Wait, Shukaku. Kyuubi let out a graveled chuckle. It seems I've said too much. Forget I said anything. Oh no, you don't. You can't just say something like that and then not tell me what you mean. Who is Shukaku? Does he have something to do with Gaara or something? The fox demon remained silent. Just as Naruto was about to start yelling again, it decided to speak. Beg me. Naruto blinked in confusion. What? Beg me and I'll tell you. What? Why the hell should I have to beg you for anything? He demanded. Because I gave you the power to defeat your enemy and escape from Konohagakure. If it hadn't been for me, you would have been caught and brought back to a severe punishment, but I've yet to receive any sort of thanks from you for doing it. So I'm not giving up any more freebies. Mortal, if you want anything further from me, you'd better be prepared to fall to your knees and praise the mighty power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Not a damn chance in hell. I don't need your help for anything, and I've never asked for it, either. A loud grunt echoed through the sewer as the Kyuubi turned his gaze away from the cell door. You just remember that the next time you find yourself in over your head, which, considering it's you, shouldn't be too long from now. Naruto tried to respond, but found his surroundings beginning to blur out. A moment later, he found himself once again looking up at the ceiling of his new room. Sitting up, he squinted as sunlight was now pouring through the window. He ran his sleeve over his face, feeling it covered with sweat. It might have been the dream experience he'd just had, or it could have been that it already felt like it was 90 degrees outside. Moving to the edge of the bed and letting his legs hang over the edge, he tried to piece back together the conversation he'd just had with the Kyuubi. What was it he had talked about? Shuku? Something or other. Maybe he should ask Baki or Temari if they knew what it was. His eyes suddenly widened. What time was it? Jumping up and making sure he still had all of his clothes and equipment, he dashed out of the room. He found himself in a room not much smaller than the living room that he and the others had all been in the night before. Glancing around, he spotted a small clock sitting on a kitchen table, reading 7:50 a.m. Sitting next to it was a bowl of fresh fruits and a glass of milk. Resting against the glass was another piece of paper, which he quickly picked up and scanned. I hope you memorized Suna well. Don't be late or I'll put Kankuro in charge of your training schedule. Baki. Damn. In a flash the milk was drained and a large handful of purple-colored berries were jammed into his mouth. A second later he was out the door and blazing off in what he hoped was the right way. He hated to think of the things that jerk Kankuro would put him through if he was given the chance. First, I'm gonna string him up to the highest branch on the tallest tree, and then cut him loose over and over until he's mastered control of his chakra climbing abilities. And then I'm gonna make him run laps around the village in the nude until he can make it all the way in less than 2 minutes. What does him being nude accomplish except for embarrassing him? Temari questioned. Absolutely nothing, Kankuro answered with an inexplicably evil grin. After that I'll work on his speed by having him dodge Karasu's poisoned needles with his arms and legs tied together. You're enjoying this far too much, Kankuro, she informed him. Gaara stood off to the side, occupying himself with forming spheres of sand in his hand and then crushing them over and over. Baki was staring at his timer, which was now showing less than a minute until 8. He was certain that he had properly motivated the boy, given the rivalry that he could already begin to see growing between him and Kankuro. Maybe he'd forgotten something. 10 seconds remained when an orange blur came into view on the horizon. He watched as it came closer, until the figure of Naruto could plainly be made out, running for all he was worth. He was only 30 meters away when he suddenly fell forward, face first into the sand. That's cheating, Kankuro, Temari accused him. Kankuro shrugged innocently. I don't know what you mean, sis. With his hand behind his back, he cut the chakra string that he'd left hidden under the sand just on the chance that this would happen. Undaunted, Naruto sprang up, ran forward and nearly collapsed before the others. Uzumaki Naruto, reporting for duty. Baka-sensei. The boy was then struck in the forehead by the timer that Baki had thrown at him. I overlooked that little slip up once, Uzumaki. If it happens again, I'm going to believe that you're doing it on purpose. Naruto rubbed the small bump on his head. So did I make it? Barely, Baki admitted. Damn it, Kankuro grumbled. Now, before we go too far into actual training, I want to see a little more of your hands-on abilities, Naruto. We'll begin today with a short spar with. Let me fight him, Naruto and Kankuro said as one, glaring holes into each other. Quote. Yes, I was going to say with Kankuro, Baki said, sounding annoyed. Not even waiting for the others to clear the general area, Kankuro unraveled Karasu and Naruto created a half-dozen cage buncheons. Allow me to give you my official welcome to Suna. Allow me to introduce you to my fist. The battle began. Oof. Naruto grunted, finding himself face down in the sand for the third time in as many minutes. A few yards away from him, a laughing Kankuro stood next to a ghastly, gangly-looking puppet. Just like I said, cage buncheons just can't measure up to Karasu. Naruto pushed himself back up, growling irritably. Damn it. No way in hell am I gonna lose to someone who wears makeup and plays with dolls. Off to the side, Gaara, Temari and Baki stood watching, the first looking as stoic as ever, the second looking slightly confused and a little let down, and the third looking thoughtful. He's not very good, is he, sensei? The kunoichi stated more than asked. Baki grunted in agreement, rubbing his chin absently. Temari was correct, in a rather blunt way. While the boy certainly had an overabundance of stamina, he just wasn't using his techniques to his fullest advantage. Despite what Kankuro had said, by all accounts Naruto, with his cage buncheon, should have had the advantage in this match. Fighting out in a barren sandy area with very few trees or large stones like they were, there were very few places for Kankuro to hide, leaving him out in the open as he manipulated his puppet. In this sense, if Naruto had used his clones properly, he could easily have kept Karasu at bay while he or another clone attacked Kankuro from a blind side. Unfortunately, Naruto was doing little more than commanding his clones to charge en masse as opposed to forming any such strategies, and Kankuro's mastery over manipulating his favorite puppet was keeping the boy from getting close enough to attack. The boy would definitely need work. Apparently being the container of Kyuubi didn't automatically make you a genius shinobi. Ready to give up, midget? Kankuro continued to taunt. I've barely had to move a muscle yet and you've lost all of your clones already. Naruto rubbed his sand-smudged face. Then I'll just make more. So saying, he performed his jutsu again and 10 more Narutos appeared around him. Kankuro just rolled his eyes. A1 trick pony, huh? Whatever, you keep setting them up and I'll keep knocking them down. I've got plenty of tricks up my sleeve, he assured him. Take this, henge. Kankuro blinked in surprise as the Narutos vanished within a puff of smoke. Henge. Henge. Baki and Temari mimicked his surprise. Kankuro started laughing. What the hell good is transforming? Going to? Oh my. Ooh, Kankuro-kun. The group of well-figured and, if you didn't count the lingering smoke, naked women squealed as they dove at the boy. Before Kankuro could even think to defend himself, the girls had latched themselves onto his arms, legs, waist and neck. Come play with us, Kankuro-kun. They cooed suggestively. Kankuro didn't have a chance, as a geyser of blood shot from his nose and he collapsed in a blood-soaked heap. The 10 clones disappeared and the remaining girl transformed back to Naruto, who was looking mighty proud of himself. Harem no jutsu, he explained to the unconscious Kankuro. Learn to fear the name. For with this technique I, Uzumaki Naruto, am invincible. Baka, Temari shouted, bashing the unsuspecting boy's head into the sand with her fan. Naruto gave a few weak twitches before pulled his head out. What was that for? He asked, spitting sand out of his mouth. Are you trying to kill us? The kunoichi demanded. She pointed behind her. Look at what that stupid technique of yours did. Naruto glanced behind her, spotting Gaara, looking slightly curious with a light grin on his face. Next to him was an unconscious Baki, who was also bleeding profusely from the nose. Wow, I never would have thought that Baka-sensei would have been the type. That's not what. Temari growled and hauled Naruto back to his feet by his jacket. Come here. She dragged him several meters away, until she was sure that they were out of hearing range of the others. What's wrong? Naruto asked. Listen Baka, when Gaara sees blood he gets excited. And when he gets excited, he gets violent. Have you already forgotten what happened the last time Gaara got violent? Naruto paled slightly, remembering Baki's warning to him. Right, so no sexy no jutsus around Gaara. Got it. How about no sexy no jutsu, period, you pervert. I'm embarrassed just knowing that someone on the same team as me knows such a move. Hey, he whined. I'm not a pervert, I just created it to defeat perverts, there's a difference. Besides, it's one of my best techniques, I've beaten every guy I've ever used it on. Temari looked disgusted. Then it's about time you learn some new ones. Naruto's eyes lit up. Are you saying you'll teach me some of your jutsus? She snorted. You wish. Why not? He pouted. Mainly because all of my jutsus are wind-based. You'd have to have chakra with a high wind affinity to even hope of learning any of my techniques. Well, maybe I do have a wind affinity. He protested. How do I find out whether I do or not? Sighing at the boy's stubbornness, she opened a small pack that she had brought with her that morning. Rummaging through it, she eventually pulled out a small square of paper. Here, take this, hold it in your hand and focus your chakra into it. Naruto grabbed the paper, staring at it like it was supposed to perform a trick. What's a piece of paper supposed to do? It's a special paper that determines people's chakra types. If you have a certain affinity with an element, it will have a significant effect on the paper. Just give it a try. Naruto still looked skeptical as he glanced back and forth between the paper and the girl. Well, if you say so. I'm going to tell you right now though, some people don't have elemental affinities, and the chances of you having a wind affinity like me are. She stopped talking upon seeing the slip of paper cleave itself perfectly into two halves in the boy's hand. Better than I would have guessed, she mumbled dumbly. Naruto stared at the two halves of paper in astonishment. Hey, it split apart. What does that mean? I guess it means we can start your jutsu training sooner than I thought, she said lightly, trying to hide her irritation at being proven wrong so quickly. Yada, the blonde shouted, throwing his fist in the air. New jutsu. How many are you going to teach me? Let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? Just because you can manipulate wind doesn't mean you'll be able to learn anything from me. I don't waste my time with low-level jutsu, you know. No sweat, he said excitedly. I'll master everything you have to teach me, Temari Nichan. I'll become the best wind jutsu user in Suna. You think so, huh? The kunoichi asked, feeling slightly miffed. Since you don't seem to already know, I already am the best wind jutsu specialist in all of Suna. Seriously? Yep. I was taught by the best, after all. The best. His eyes widened. You mean the case cage taught you? Of course, He is our dad, you know. Naruto was astounded. Why didn't you tell me that before? If he's your dad, then you could put in a good word for me when my time comes to become the new Cage. Temari batted him on the side of his head. You really do have a one-track mind, don't you? Only if it's something I really, really want. He answered proudly. That reminds me, is it really true that there's absolutely no ramen in Suna whatsoever? Temari just shook her head, more in exasperation than to confirm his question. Without even realizing it, she'd ended up lost in a conversation with Naruto when she should have been concentrating on training. Maybe having someone around that she could actually talk to wouldn't be so bad. Turning back to the others, they found that Gaara had already vanished and the two men were still out cold. Well, it doesn't look like we're going to get any more training this morning. Naruto had the good sense to look embarrassed. Naruto walked back through the village, having helped bring Kankuro and Baki back to the house to recover from massive blood loss. He was now searching for lunch. He hummed happily to himself as he went. Today was going great. He'd had his first team practice, would be getting special jutsu training from Temari, and beat that idiot Kankuro. It was all but perf. He stopped his trail of thought right there as something clicked in his head. Ever since he'd come to Suna, his life had seemingly turned into a seesaw of good and bad fortune. Whenever something good happened for him, something bad kept happening soon after. First he'd made friends with Temari, Baki and Kankuro, sort of, but then he'd almost been killed by Gaara. Then he'd been made a ninja, only to find out that he was living in a village completely devoid of ramen. Following that logic, and seeing how well his day was going so far, it seemed almost certain that his luck would be changing. Eep! Naruto yelped as he felt himself trip over what felt like a small sand dune. Reflexively closing his eyes, he expected to end up with his face in the sand, hopefully no one would see him. So he was rather shocked when he felt no impact, but instead felt himself being lifted upside down by his foot. Opening his eyes, he found himself staring into a pair of light green eyes surrounded by thick, dark rings. Crap. What's up, Gaara? He asked, hoping the situation wasn't really as bad as it looked. That technique you used, Gaara said darkly. Teach me how it works. Quote. Naruto was dumbfounded. He attempted to speak once, but couldn't seem to form the proper words. He decided to try again. Quote. Wah. Gaara's blank stare didn't waver. You caused Kankuro and Baki to bleed copious amounts without even touching them. All you had to do was change your appearance. I want to know how you did it. Naruto blanched. It appeared the situation had just become worse than he had thought. I really don't think that Temari-Nichan would approve of that. Then die, was Gaara's short response. Wait. Naruto cried as he felt the sand around his ankle start to spread up his leg. Let's not be too hasty about this. I mean, well, why would you want to learn sexy no jutsu anyway? The sand stopped spreading, but it didn't recede either. To make someone bleed as much as I like, I usually have to crush their bodies or rip them apart. Unfortunately, a person who is dead only bleeds once. It would be more enjoyable if I could make them bleed many times before I killed them. Naruto cringed at the gruesome images that filled his head from those descriptions. Unfortunately, at the same time it seemed funny that Gaara would want to learn sexy no jutsu for such a reason. Naruto had to make the assumption that Gaara really knew nothing at all about women or the female body. Still, he wasn't about to start laughing about it. You will teach me, said Gaara, sounding more like a command than a question. Naruto quickly looked over his options. Possible death at the hands of a pissed-off Temari, or certain death at the hands of Gaara. God, his karma sucked. Well, you know, I can't guarantee that you'll be able to learn it, but if I show you how to do it, will you please lay off the whole killing me thing? Gaara looked to be contemplating the request. If you cannot guarantee that I will learn it, then I cannot guarantee that I won't kill you. Naruto drooped. It didn't look like he was going to get off any easier than that. Fair enough, I guess. The sand dispersed, dropping the blonde on his head. Don't think that I'll forget, the redhead called back as he trudged off, leaving Naruto by himself again. Naruto got back to his feet, brushing the sand from his hair. His life in Suna just kept getting stranger and stranger. Temari and Baki certainly wouldn't be happy if they happened to find out about this. On the bright side, however, according to his recent chain of fortune, he should be due for some good luck real soon. Maybe that good luck would come in the form of a traveling ramen vendor. Form hand seals. Bird, rat, dragon, bird. Focus chakra. Now, place fist on ground, and release. Ha! He grinned triumphantly as he felt hot gusts of wind begin swirling around his body, kicking up sheets of sand in an imitation of Gaara's own. The winds continued to pick up speed, his grin grew wider and wider. Until a blast of sand shot up into his face, knocking him to his back in a sputtering heap. He sat up, spitting sand from his mouth and brushing out his hair. He was really beginning to hate sand really quickly. Damn, I could have sworn I had it right that time. You're still not focusing properly. Naruto turned to his companion. What did I do wrong this time, Temari Nichan? Watch. So quick that the boy almost missed it, Temari had formed the 4 seals and slammed her fist into the sand. Instantly, a strong wind picked up, casting a swirling vortex of sand around the body of the kunoichi. The sand twister roared loudly for several seconds before dying back down. Naruto, who had been blown backward by the sudden winds, sat up and gaped at her. Wow, was all he could mutter. Fuden. Tatsumaki Shoheki. A defensive sea-level jutsu used to deflect incoming projectiles as well as scatter enemies when surrounded. The blonde sat down in front of him, setting her fan on the ground beside her. Now, the reason why yours is still not working the way mine did is because you're still not grasping the concept of chakra manipulation to its fullest extent. Naruto stared blankly, but nodded. Okay, so what do I do? First of all, you're gathering too much chakra required for the technique that you're trying to perform, the kunoichi continued. But once you actually execute the jutsu, you don't release enough chakra for it to perform properly. That's why it keeps starting out so weak and slowly. But when you continue to pump chakra into your tornado to build it up, you put too much into it at one time, which is what causes you to keep eating mouthfuls of sand. The proper way to do it is to put in just the right amount and then keep that amount pumping in constantly. The longer you add your chakra, the longer and more powerful the tornado will become. You've been learning chakra manipulation with Baki Sensei for about 3 days now, and I don't know how much training you've had before coming here, but to be completely blunt, your chakra control absolutely sucks. By focusing excessive amounts of chakra and then only using about a third of it, you're wasting a huge portion of your chakra supplies. Remember, you can't reuse the wasted chakra that you've focused, so once it's gone, it's gone. Then you have to rest until you get your stamina back naturally. Are you keeping up with me? Naruto blinked, hiding his confusion well. Temari rolled her eyes. Fortunately for you, you've got more stamina stored up in you than an alpha male wolf. Even with all the chakra that you waste, you're still able to create waves of shadow clones without fatiguing. So if you could get a firm handle on your control, you could become one of the better shinobi that Suna has to offer. Temari saw Naruto's eyes light up but cut him off. I said, could become, meaning if you can actually do it. Right now you've already proven that you're not even a match against Kankuro when he's not even using any of Karasu's weapons. Naruto's brow furrowed in thought. Wouldn't it just be easier to use a big fan like you use? That seems a lot simpler than having to form a bunch of different seals and focusing chakra and all that other stuff. Not necessarily, it isn't, she explained. It's true that I don't have to form seals when I use my fan, but you still have to focus chakra. In fact, when using weapons to perform jutsu with, you have to be able to channel your chakra into the weapon itself, which is much more difficult than just manipulating it within your own body. If you mess that up, you have a good chance of destroying your weapon instead. Until you've mastered the basics, you won't have a prayer of a chance at mastering something like this. Naruto drooped. Besides, a fan like this isn't something you can just go out and buy. This thing was made by my grandmother, she told him, running her hand along the giant fan fondly. Naruto couldn't respond. Not having any grandmother or other family to speak of made it a bit hard to relate to. The moment passed and soon the two were back to training. Naruto repeated the process of forming, focusing, and almost succeeding several more times, while Temari sat to the side, giving pointers every couple of attempts. Before the mid-afternoon heat became too much for both and they decided to call it a day. How can you stand this? Naruto huffed as the two walked down the sandy streets toward Temari's home. He had rolled up his pants legs to above his knees and removed his orange jacket halfway through his training, which he was now using to wipe away the sweat that was pouring down his face. Geez, I'm sweating like a pig and you still look fresh as a daisy. What gives? Your thick clothes are absorbing and trapping all the heat that touches it, while mine is specially designed to disperse heat and keep the wearer cool in hot conditions. Desert wear, almost everyone in Suna wears it. That's it? He asked. Nope. Move closer to me. Huh. The command surprised him, as he noticed the two were already walking fairly close to one another. Don't get any dumb thoughts, she warned. She held up her hand. Here, touch my hand. Naruto stared at the offered appendage. And she doesn't want me getting weird thoughts. Hesitantly, he reached out and put his hand on hers, making his eyes widen in surprise. What the heck? Temari grinned, taking her hand back. It's another wind jutsu that I created. It creates a tiny breeze that travels along my skin to keep me cool. It's tricky, but it sure as hell beats having to take half a dozen cold bathes each day like some people here do. Naruto stared at the girl, admiration and awe visible on his face. A girl her age could already create her own unique jutsus. Well, he'd created a few of his own, too. But hers were certainly a lot more sensible, he supposed. It was something ingenious to come up with for life in the desert, but now that he'd heard of it, he couldn't believe that no one had ever thought of something like it before. But then admiration turned into annoyance. Why didn't you teach me that jutsu first? He demanded. Your teammate is dehydrating right next to you and you're keeping jutsus like that a secret. Temari crossed her arms and frowned at him. Well, aren't you the ungrateful one? Here I am taking time out of my own life to give you personal lessons, something I haven't even done before for my own brothers, and yet all you can do is complain about it. Why do I even bother? Naruto, rather predictably, panicked. No, it's not that I'm ungrateful or anything, 'cause I am, really. I mean, you doing this is one of the few nice things that anyone's ever done for me. It's just that, well, I thought. Temari hid a smirk, letting the boy ramble on for a few more seconds before cutting in. Really? Because I was planning on teaching you this jutsu once you got a little more familiar with wind jutsus first, but now I don't really think you deserve it. No wait, I deserve it. I mean, I promise not to complain anymore. Just teach it to me, please. Quote. Well, maybe I could still teach you, but I am still taking time out of my personal life to do this, you know. So what exactly are you going to do to pay me back for it, Naruto brightened slightly. Oh, well I could. Then he found his problem. What exactly could he do to repay her? He didn't have many hobbies or things that he excelled at that didn't involve ninja business in some way. Most of his life before Suna mainly involved pranks, ramen, training, and not a whole lot else, honestly. Temari couldn't keep the grin away anymore as she watched the poor boy practically pull his hair out in distress. She wondered how much longer she could string him along before he got wise to her game. Probably at least for the rest of the day, would have been her guess. Too bad she had other things that needed to be done that day, too. Naruto, she said, swatting the boy lightly on the head to bring him back to reality. What do you say we work out your payments later? I'm getting hungry here. Naruto blinked at her, letting his incoherent thoughts slip away at her decision. Okay, sure. For about a minute more, the two walked in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. But as they approached the house, Naruto remembered something that he'd been meaning to do for the past few days. Say, Temari Nichan, what is it? She asked absently. Do you know what a shukaku is? Naruto watched worriedly as all the color instantly drained from the kunoichi's face. Where did you hear about that? She asked quietly. Now it was his turn to pale. He hadn't thought that she would ask him that, and what was he supposed to tell her? That a demon fox who lived inside his body mentioned it in passing during a dream he'd had. Not bloody likely. He took a stab in the dark air. I heard a few villagers mentioning it yesterday. Temari had no idea what to say. Of course he would hear things about Shukaku the longer he stayed in the village, but she didn't think it would have been this soon. Now what? Did she tell him or not? He was part of the team now, so he probably did deserve to know about Gaara's other self, for safety and necessity reasons. But on the other hand, having him know could very easily complicate things between everyone. I think it would be best to ask Baki-sensei about that, she concluded. I'm sure he'd be able to tell you more than I could. Naruto scratched his head. Yeah, I guess. That's what I'd planned on doing. Sorry. Don't worry about it, she said dismissively. Just, don't mention it to anyone else until you talk to him, alright? Naruto nodded mutely, and the two continued onward in a very awkward silence. At least he now knew that the Kyuubi hadn't just been screwing with him. Judging by the way Temari reacted, this Shukaku thing was definitely bad news, and he still had the sneaking feeling that it somehow involved Gaara. Now he really needed to begin figuring these things out. The rest of the day passed by without incident, though the hours seemed to speed by far too quickly for Naruto's liking. Baki had stayed out for the entire time that Naruto had been at the house, so he'd never gotten the opportunity to question him about Shukaku or Gaara. But that's where another problem sprang up. Tonight was the night where he was finally going to have to meet up with Gaara for his jutsu training. It had been 3 days since Gaara had brought it up, and even though he still wasn't feeling up to doing it, he had the sneaking suspicion that Gaara was growing impatient. Watching the redhead crush a sand replica of Naruto that morning during practice was a fairly good signal that his time was running out. Nightfall came, and with Baki still gone to who knew where, Naruto left the house and made his way to his teammate's home. A lot of bad thoughts began filling his head as he walked. From all the things he already knew about Gaara, the boy could very well kill him the minute he showed up for delaying the training for so many days. Or there was the chance that Gaara wouldn't be able to master the technique and would kill him out of irritation. And then there was still the matter of one of the others finding out about what they were doing. Temari would rip him a new one, Baki would berate him and probably demote him for ignoring his orders, and Kankuro, being the royal jerk that he was, would join in just for the fun of it. Or, maybe they would all find the act of Gaara learning sexy no jutsu to be funny as hell and laugh the whole thing off. Again. Not bloody likely. Before he knew it, he was standing outside the mansion-sized house. Breathing a heavy sigh, he jumped up to the roof. He had barely touched down before his body was bound in a cocoon of sand and slammed against the wall of the stairway. Wait Gaara, it's just me. He cried earnestly. I know, came a cold reply. The boy stood up from his position at the ledge of the roof, then turned and walked over to stand before the trapped blonde. You've been avoiding me. A drop of sweat formed on Naruto's brow. No way, pal. It's not that I've avoided you on purpose or anything, I've just, been busy and stuff. But hey, I'm here now, right, so how about that training? Gaara's glare seemed to lessen slightly, or it might have been a trick of the moonlight, he wasn't sure. But finally, the sands receded back into the gourd and Naruto fell to the ground. Gaara silently positioned himself on the ground in front of him. Teach, he commanded. Naruto gingerly rubbed his sore lower back, holding his tongue so as not to tell Gaara that the real thing he needed taught was people skills. Okay. Well, I guess the first thing you should know about sexy no jutsu is that it doesn't work on everybody. Gaara's hard stare was Naruto's only indication that he should continue. You see, it's meant to only work on guys. Although, I suppose it could work on certain girls, maybe, and then there are some guys who are able to resist it, so. Why was I able to resist it when Baki and Kankuro were not? Gaara questioned. Do you like girls? I don't like anyone. Naruto flinched at the venomous statement. That's probably why, then. And it won't work on me, either, since I created it. I know better than to let it get to me. He could have been wrong, but Gaara almost looked disappointed at hearing that. Tell me how it works, Gaara commanded. Right. You do know how to henge, right? The Sand Nin gave a small nod. Okay. Well, basically, all you have to do is transform yourself into the image of a sexy girl. The less amount of clothes she's wearing, the better the result, he explained. Sexy. Naruto faltered. He didn't even know what sexy meant. Well, you know, sexy is just, it's the way a girl's body looks that makes you attracted to. He paused when he remembered that Gaara didn't seem to find girls attractive. Okay, forget that. Sexy is like women that are thin and curvy, with large, well, they have to have, Staring into the completely neutral face of Gaara while trying to describe this made Naruto feel more foolish and perverted than ever before in his life. Then an idea hit him. Wait here a minute, he said. I'll be right back. And with that, he jumped off the roof. Gaara waited, unmoving, for about 3 minutes when Naruto returned with something in his hand. Here, look at this, he told him, handing over the rolled-up magazine. Gaara accepted the item in curiosity. Slowly, he began flipping through the pages, growing in understanding as he did. So this is the image that I need to imitate, he muttered more to himself than to Naruto. Yep. Just get your henge to look as close to them as you can, and you should have no problems with it. Gaara turned the magazine sideways. Do women often do such things to each other while bathing? Skip that part. Naruto prompted urgently. Gaara dropped the magazine. I will try now. Naruto gulped. Good luck. Gaara ignored him, and formed the proper hand seal. With a puff of smoke, he vanished from sight. Naruto watched on expectantly, waiting to see what would turn out. His life could very well hang in the balance of the outcome. In no time the smoke had mostly cleared, leaving Naruto standing face to face with Temari. Or at least, a red-headed Temari with little black rings around her eyes, but the rest of the face and, if he had to venture a guess, that body definitely belonged to his female teammate. Faced with this new revelation, the boy found no other alternative but to faint. When consciousness returned, the blonde found himself staring up at a back-to-normal Gaara. I thought you told me this technique didn't affect you, he said, though he didn't look all that upset about it. Naruto sat up and shook the cobwebs from his head, thanking his lucky stars that he hadn't bled nearly as much as he thought he would have. That's only because I wasn't expecting you to turn into your sister, he said in annoyance. You told me to transform into a woman, Gaara stated evenly. Temari is a woman. That's not, he stammered. He didn't think he'd ever be able to look as Temari again without blushing at this point. You're not supposed to turn into someone you actually know. That just makes it weird. And could also get me killed in a heartbeat, he said, whispering the last part. Then what is the right way to do it? He asked, starting to sound annoyed. Just do like I do, he told him, hoping to calm him before he lost his temper. I just tried to imagine what I might look like as a girl and transformed into that. Gaara remained silent for a while before reaching down and picking up the discarded magazine. Where did you get this? A guilty look crossed the blonde's face. Damn it. Where is it? Kankuro cried. The puppet ninja was standing in the middle of his room, which looked like a hurricane had passed through it. He frantically pulled the mattress off his bed, then ran to the back of his closet, throwing things out without a care. I know it was here last night. Damn, where did I put it? Lose something? A voice from the doorway inquired. No. Go away. Temari frowned, then turned and walked away. Whatever. Kankuro continued searching when a dreadful thought hit him. Temari. What if she had already found it and was toying with him? Oh God, she'd never let him live that down. It had to be here. I just found it lying around somewhere, Naruto answered, trying to look innocent. Gaara glanced at him, then back to the magazine. I will keep it for further study until I perfect this technique then. Naruto snorted. Coming from anyone other than Gaara, that comment would have sounded incredibly perverted. Well, good luck with that, then. You will meet me here again tomorrow. Huh, but I've already shown you. Until I have perfected the technique, you will continue to assist me, or I will kill you. Naruto shivered. Well, when you put it that way. And without another word, Gaara turned away and positioned himself back on the ledge of the roof, gazing up at the moon. Naruto stared at him for a few more seconds, then he jumped from the roof and began making his way back to Baki's. Back on the roof, Gaara suddenly clutched his head, letting a deep snarl escape his throat. Yes, I agree, he mumbled, squinting his eyes open, and gazing down at the vanishing Naruto's form. There is something different about him. What do we do about it? A moment of silence passed as the boy seemed to be waiting for something. Then he grinned. Yes, perhaps you're right. Naruto-kun. Naruto couldn't quite tell where he was, as the surroundings seemed a bit blurred. What he could tell was that Temari was standing before him, smiling at him in a very suggestive manner. He opened his mouth to answer but couldn't form any proper words. Naruto-kun. The next thing he knew, the blonde girl before him was stark naked, as the light purple outfit she normally wore simply dissolved off of her body. In his shock, he tried to turn his head away before he suffered another nosebleed, but found that no matter where he looked, she was still right in front of him. Naruto. Now there were hundreds of them. One right after the other, still looking at him expectantly, and he couldn't even find the proper strength to squeeze his eyes shut to block out the images. Naruto. Now they all had red hair, and the lingering smoke around their bodies had changed to sand. Uzumaki. One by one, each red-headed Temari poofed into a Gaara, the seductive smile being replaced by a sinister glower. The sand swirling around them grew fangs and started twisting about like giant snakes. Then he saw that all the Gaaras were still naked. Uzumaki. And then, suddenly, he was sitting upright in his bed. His heart raced, his body soaked with sweat, and his mind was clouded with images that had haunted his mind just seconds before. Kami, he mumbled, dragging a hand through his matted hair. I think I've created a monster. I'd take my dreamtime conversations with Kyubi any day if it meant no more dreams like that one. Then his door blew off its hinges, and standing in the doorway was a ticked-off Baki. Naruto made the assumption that he'd been waiting there for a while. You sleep like a log, Uzumaki, but nap time is over now, he growled. The cage has summoned us. We have a mission. Mission? Really? Suddenly the dream was a forgotten memory. Yes, now get up and let's go. Temari is already waiting for us there, he said impatiently. What about Gaara and Kankuro? They won't be coming. Now stop asking questions. Yes sir. Naruto jumped out of bed and began dressing. Then he stopped as something dawned on him. He gave Baki a strange look. Hey sensei. What? Naruto. Did you call me Naruto-kun a minute ago? The two stared at each other in a painful silence. I'm going to forget you ever asked me that question, Uzumaki. And I'll thank you now to never suggest it again. Right. How he hated the desert. The blistering temperature was absolute torture on his skin. Even with his entire body covered with the long gray cloak and sun hat, he was still very uncomfortable. He wouldn't even be here now if it weren't so important to his cause, though he would be making it a priority to never come back again. Well, not unless he felt the urge to destroy the place, at any rate. He came into view of the large village and approached the front gates, where he was quickly stopped by two Junin guards. State your name and business here, one of them demanded. Rather than answer, he simply lifted his hat, giving the men a good look at his face. The guard who had spoken gulped in surprise. Oh, it's you, sir. Please forgive my rudeness. Kage-sama is awaiting you. Please, go ahead. The man smirked, lowered his hat and continued on into the village. Would you stop fidgeting around, Naruto? Temari whispered to the boy. I can't help it, he whispered back giddily. This will be my first real mission as a ninja and I'm excited. The Kage cleared his throat loudly, causing them both to snap to attention. Are you through? He asked darkly. They both nodded stiffly. Good. Now then, we received a letter from the Land of Rain this morning. It appears that they have been having several conflicts with the Grass Country in the past few months, and currently sit on the verge of an all-out war. Specifics have not been given to us yet, but both sides are apparently looking to solve their feud without the need for further violence. However, every time a meeting is held to discuss peace, more problems arise between them. So the leader of Omegakure has asked that we send a few reinforcements to aid them in the event that a battle does break out. Naruto's excitement continued to grow. This sounded like it was turning into a really important mission for them. He glanced at Temari to see how she was reacting, but her gaze was still fixed straight ahead at her father. Catching the hint, Naruto turned back as well. Baki, you and your team will go to Omegakure as backup. Follow whatever orders their leader might give, but remember, you are not to instigate an attack against anyone from Kusagakure unless it has become clear that fighting is unavoidable. This is essentially meant to be a peace mission. Is that clear? All three nodded. Good. In that case, Uzumaki and Temari, you are both dismissed. Baki, I need to speak with you for a minute. Baki bowed his head to the Kage, then turned to the kids. You two go inform Gaara and Kankuro of our mission. I will meet up with you all at the village gates in 1 hour. Right. Naruto shouted, pumping his fist in the air. Yes, sensei, Temari replied with a small salute to both Baki and her father. As the two genin left the room, Baki returned his attention to the Kage. Sir, I'm expecting an important guest in just a moment, but before he gets here, there's something else that we need to discuss. This is gonna be so cool. Please tell me you won't be this hyper all the way to AIM. Aren't you excited about it too, Temari-nichan? Naruto questioned. Not really, she admitted. I've done this sort of thing before, and it wasn't that big. Well, I haven't, he interrupted gleefully. My first real mission, and it involves stopping a war. And all this time I was afraid that my first mission was gonna be something lame like catching somebody's runaway cat or weeding someone's garden or something like that. Temari grimaced, remembering her own first mission, which sadly enough, involved gathering scented herbs for an elderly woman who liked using them in baths. That was a dark time of her career, for certain. So what's Omegakure like, Temari-nichan? Naruto asked, bringing her back from her memories. I've only been there once before, but from what I've seen the place is made up mostly of rainforest or jungle-like areas. As you might guess, it gets more annual rainfall than anywhere else in the world, and even when it's not raining it's still ridiculously cool and humid. In short, almost an exact opposite of Suna. Naruto was about to comment on that as they rounded a corner, but was stopped when he nearly bumped into someone. He managed to stop himself just in time, but as he looked up to apologize to the person, their eyes met and his words caught in his throat. He studied the man before him, who was already studying him in return. His face was a ghostly pale, as though his skin hadn't been touched by sunlight in years. Underneath his wide-brimmed hat, he caught a glimpse of long, black hair. His thin mouth was twisted into a curious smirk as he looked Naruto up and down. His eyes were narrow slits of bright yellow, with a hint of danger hidden within them. The man resembled a large snake, Naruto decided. And just from looking at him, he also decided that he wasn't someone that he would want to associate himself with. The man's eyes swept over Naruto once more in fascination. Then with a small tip of his hat, he simply walked right past him. "Please excuse me," he muttered lightly. "But I'm in a bit of a hurry." As he walked out of sight, Naruto shivered and turned to Temari. "What kind of creepy guy was that? That's not somebody that you want to get yourself involved with, Naruto," she assured him. "He's been sending a lot of letters and envoys to father for months now, but I've never found out what they were about. All I can guess is that he's hoping for some sort of alliance with him." "So who is he?" Naruto asked. "The only things I know for sure are that he's the leader of Otogakure, from the land of rice fields. His name is Orochimaru," the Kazekage greeted. "A pleasure to finally meet you again after such a long time." "Believe me, Kazekage-sama, the pleasure is all mine," Orochimaru replied, finally removing his hat. The Kazekage took a moment to wave Baki away, who bowed and left the room without another word. "I trust that your trip here went well. As well as can be expected," the pale man answered. "Though I do admit that this sandy wasteland atmosphere isn't exactly pleasant for me. Perhaps next time we can arrange for you to meet with me in Oto. I think you would enjoy it." "Perhaps," he answered curtly. "But I know you didn't travel all this way out here just to discuss the weather." Orochimaru grinned. "Before we get down to business, a question, if I may." Kazekage eyed him cautiously. "Go ahead. I happened upon a young boy on my way here, a blond boy in an orange suit with whisker marks on his face. Might I trouble you for his name?" The Yondaime kept his face emotionless, not knowing if the snake Sanin was up to something or not. "Uzumaki Naruto. A newly ranked genin of mediocre talent. Why do you ask?" Orochimaru's grin widened as he shook his head. "No reason, sir. Just being my nosy self. Now then, what say we get down to the real matter at hand?" Meanwhile, in Konoha, "And that is the situation," Sarutobi said, addressing the four people standing before his desk. "The Land of Grass has sent a request for extra manpower from us in the event of an upcoming battle with Omegakure. You four will travel to Kusagakure and lend support to their cause, but they have made it clear that they would like this conflict solved without having to resort to violence if at all possible. Is that clear?" The Junin of the group stepped forward and struck what he believed to be a manly pose. "Yosh. This mission is in good hands, Hokage-sama. My young, lovable students and I shall show the shinobi and kusa and aim the burning fires of our youth. They will see the errors of their ways and be sent down the path to peace and prosperity." One of the boys standing behind him, looking like an exact copy of the taller man, flexed his arm. "Guy-sensei is so cool," he declared. "Watching him in action fills my spirit with the flames of springtime and my body with the passions of youth." "Lee!" Guy cried. "Guy-sensei!" The two men fell into a tight embrace. One could almost hear the crashing waves beneath the setting sun in the background. The girl and second boy who were watching them turned their heads away in embarrassment. "Yosha!" Guy bellowed loudly after releasing Lee. "Let us be off, my students. If we leave now, we can make Kusa in exactly 3 days." "No, Guy-sensei," Lee objected. "I believe we can get there in only 2 days. Don't say stupid things like that," the girl shouted after the two as they ran from the room. "You'll only encourage him." The remaining boy watched his team exit the room, then sighed and calmly followed suit. Sarutobi smiled lightly as the team left. It wasn't often that they received a request for help from Kusa, but he was certain that Guy and his students could handle the situation. After all, in a peace treaty like this with Kusa and AIM, what could really go wrong for them? The cage flipped idly through a few files that littered his desk, outwardly appearing to be engrossed in his work. On the inside, however, his mind was on anything but paperwork. His thoughts kept returning to the conversation he'd had the day before with Orochimaru and the plan that he had proposed to him. The cage, of course, was never a very trusting person, no matter what the circumstance, and every fiber of his being warned him that Orochimaru was not someone to be trusted, ever. Imagine wanting to use the upcoming Chunin exams as a cover-up for his plot to destroy Konohagakure. Did he not realize that Suna was currently bound with them through a treaty? What would the rest of the shinobi world think of Suna if they were to break that treaty in such a way? They'd never be trusted by anyone else again. But, on the other hand, everything that the legendary Sannin had said seemed to make so much sense. Suna was currently struggling because that imbecile daimyo refused to use Suna's own shinobi for missions. He continued to push jobs off on Konoha as a way of saving himself money. But if Konoha were gone, it would leave the daimyo with no other alternative than to rely on him. Besides, even with this treaty of theirs, it wasn't as though Konoha had ever done anything of benefit for Suna anyway. And, with Konoha out of the way and Orochimaru and Odogakure by his side, Suna would become the most dominant village in all the lands. No other country would dare stand before them with the sort of manpower that they both possessed. He sighed, running his hand through his short hair. Orochimaru hadn't been very specific about how this invasion was going to work, except for the few hints concerning Gaara. He frowned. Gaara was nigh unstoppable, but he didn't believe that his son and a few extra soldiers could topple the greatest shinobi village in the land so easily. There had to be something more to the Snake Sannin's plan. But what? A sharp knock on his office door brought his attention back to the present. What is it? He barked. Lord Kazekage-sama, a voice answered from behind the closed door. A messenger from Konoha has just arrived, requesting an audience with you. His eyes narrowed. He wasn't one to believe in such absurd things as karma or twisted irony, but the timing was still a little too convenient for his liking. Show him in, he said after a brief pause. The doors opened and a man in his 20s walked in. Judging by the sour look on his face, it was apparent that the man felt he was simply wasting his time in being here. He stiffly lowered himself into a respectable bow before speaking. Forgive the unannounced intrusion, Kazekage-sama, he greeted. But I have come to you today by the will of Lord Hokage-sama. I assumed as much, the Kazekage replied curtly, not in any mood to carry out formalities at the moment. And what is so urgent that Sarutobi Dono would seek out my assistance? The man sighed, as though the mere effort of forming words was becoming a burden on him. Several days ago, a young boy ran off from our village. 1. Uzumaki Naruto. The boy has been a great nuisance upon our village for many years now, has no family and is not a qualified shinobi, but Hokage-sama has taken to looking after the boy for some time. I have been sent here today to ask if you might have any information on the boy or possibly on his whereabouts. The Yondaime listened, thankful for his ability to remain completely emotionless at all times, for this was something that he hadn't expected in the slightest. It seems a rather strange request to seek out help from neighboring lands to help search so thoroughly for a person whom you claim is nothing but a nuisance, he commented. Under normal circumstances, you would be all too correct, sir, the shinobi assured him. But this boy holds a certain sentimental value to our Hokage-sama. Furthermore, the night that he escaped, he attempted to steal a very valuable object from the village. He is to stand trial for theft and possible treason against Konoha if he is found. The Kazekage hid a smirk. Of course the man before him was lying, or at the least, not giving the full truth. The way he spoke made it sound like he'd been reading from a script, and as he already knew from Naruto himself, everyone in Konoha knew about the existence of the Kyuubi inside him. No wonder the ninja looked like he didn't want to be here. He'd never attempt to bring the demon child back to their village unless it was a direct order from the Hokage. Though that did bring up some confusion, as he had believed that no one, much less the Sandaime himself, had any feelings for the boy back in Konoha. He held in a small sigh, knowing that there was no other choice that he could make at the moment. "Forgive me," he responded. "But I know of no one by the name Uzumaki Naruto." The man actually grinned in relief at hearing that statement, and stood up to leave. "I see. In that case, I apologize for wasting your time, Kazekage-sama. I will take my leave now." The Kazekage almost laughed as the man exited the room. He certainly did detest the poor boy. Hadn't even bothered to give a description of what Naruto looked like, and then to give up so easily. If everyone in Konoha felt that way about Naruto, it was no wonder why he left. The fact that his own son suffered the same way in his own village escaped him. The smirk reappeared on his face. Well, it didn't matter now. If they were foolish enough to let something so potentially useful slip through their fingers, then they didn't deserve to have him back. This also gave him all new possibilities for the approaching invasion. Assuming the boy didn't mind a chance at a little payback, that is. In the less than 2 weeks' time that Naruto had been living in Suna, he discovered something very interesting about desert life. No matter how damn hot the place got during the day, it could still get really damn cold at night. Still, the slight shivers that occurred every few minutes were a welcome change from suffering from dehydration every day like he had been. The new climate-oriented clothes helped, too. While he was preparing to leave, he'd remembered Temari talking about the special clothing designed for desert travel, and decided to find some for himself. But as luck or fate would have it, all the outfits at the store were expensive, and he'd barely had enough for one of them. Remarkably, he'd happened to find an outfit that looked almost exactly like his normal orange suit, but it turned out to be a size too small for him. He'd finally ended up with a set of light blue pants, blue and orange shirt and new black mesh undershirt. It really was amazing how light and soft the outfit felt. If only it had a little more orange to it. The blonde was sitting out on a large dune, giving him quite a view of the landscape. Unfortunately, other than his team's own little campground, there wasn't anything to look at other than sand, which grew boring after the first 11 or 12 seconds. Laying his head back into his folded hands, he changed his attention to the sky. Maybe counting stars would be a little more interesting than counting grains of sand. Maybe. There was another nice thing about the wide open desert at night. Unlike Konoha, there was absolutely nothing to distract from or block out the night sky. It really was quite a sight to behold. Still awake, craning his neck around, Naruto spotted Temari kneeling down about a foot behind him. "Nah," he answered with a wide grin. "I'm just too excited." Temari chuckled, shifting her body over until she was sitting beside him rather than behind him. "I guess nobody on the team plans to sleep tonight." Naruto slowly glanced around the camp. Gaara stood several meters away, staring out into the desert like an unmoving statue. Kankuro's silhouette could be seen through the thin lining of his tent, fiddling with Karasu. And sitting next to the small fire that had been built was Baki, staring into the dancing flames and lost deep in thought. "Baki-sensei's been kind of distant since we left, hasn't he?" Naruto mentioned. Temari nodded in agreement. "Yeah, he's barely said a word since we left Suna. Usually he'd be going over missions briefing or something. Maybe he's just nervous." Naruto guessed. "I'll bet it's not every day that you get a mission to stop a war like this." Temari shrugged. She knew that wasn't the reason. Baki had been doing this sort of thing for years. But since she didn't know the reason, she didn't care too much. "We'll be in aim tomorrow, won't we?" Naruto asked. Temari nodded. "Yep. Getting anxious." "Yeah," he admitted. "My first real chance to show what I can do. I wonder if I'll get to fight someone." "You'd better hope not. This is a peace mission, remember." "I know," He pouted. But I really want to show off my new techniques that you've been teaching me. Temari rolled her eyes. You know, most shinobi don't go around showing off their techniques to others. Well, I'm not most shinobi, Naruto replied proudly. Temari had to grin at that. That, you certainly aren't. Naruto chuckled lightly and a peaceful silence took over. He turned his attention back up to the night sky, and Temari lowered herself to her back in order to do the same. Neither blonde spoke, as neither felt the need to. For Naruto, just knowing that there was someone who didn't mind being around him like this was enough to bring him peace of mind. For Temari, spending time in silence with someone was a norm, as the only people she was ever really around were her brothers and sensei. Gaara never spoke unless he was prompted by someone, sometimes not even then, and Baki was the same unless he was giving instructions. Kankuro never had anything to say to her unless it was something snide or sarcastic, which would lead to a short squabble that never lasted very long anyway. But it didn't really matter to her. Temari was always one to judge real comfort in silence. It was one thing to be able to carry on a conversation with someone without feeling uncomfortable, but when you were able to sit in silence with someone without it making you feel awkward and in need of finding anything to talk about, that signified true peace with whoever you were with. She turned her head toward Naruto, finding him looking as peaceful as she was feeling. She smiled. For some reason, whether it had been the glow of the moonlight, or those strange feline marks on his cheeks, or just the fact that he was finally starting to lose some of the barely hidden pain that had drifted across his face all too often since she first met him, Temari was beginning to notice that Naruto was not all that bad looking. He still had a bit of a softer, baby face, but he was definitely far from ugly. God, I'm not that lonely, am I? She wondered. He's 2 years younger than me, after all. That's what she told herself, but even with that, it was easy to see that the boy's past had done a real job of forcing him to grow up faster than he should have. Just like Gaara, the same face that depicted an immature, loudmouthed child could also look a little bit too much the way Gaara used to look before he had killed off all his emotions. She knew that Naruto had been hated back in Konoha for reasons unknown, but unlike Gaara, Naruto was still at a point where he still seemed to care about other people and what they thought about him. That was what kept him looking for acceptance in people rather than closing himself off from everyone else like her brother. Naruto chose that moment to turn his head slightly, and noticed Temari staring at him out of the corner of his eye. What's wrong? He asked. Realizing that she'd been caught staring, even if it was unintentionally, Temari turned her face away before the blush became visible on her face. Oh, I just, nothing, she mumbled evasively. Oh, he said casually. I thought maybe I had something on my face. He took a closer look at the girl. Hey, are you okay? Your face looks red. You don't have heatstroke or something, do you? Temari's blush worsened as she watched Naruto reach out to touch her forehead. Quickly she grabbed his hand with her own, trying to keep her distance as nonchalantly as possible. Of course not. I live in the desert, I never get heatstroke. Okay. That's good then, he said, but his frown deepened. But you do look a little red, you sure you're? Yes, I'm fine, really. She was getting irritated at not being able to rein in her sudden burst of emotion. When the hell did she become so weak-willed? And why the hell did Naruto have to keep looking at her like that? Nay, Temari Nichan, what? She asked, still not able to look at his face. Can I have my hand back? Aghast, Temari looked down to see that she still had a very firm grip on the boy's hand. She dropped it like a venomous snake and immediately sprang to her feet. Well, I'm off to bed now. We have a big day tomorrow, so I suggest you do the same. Good night. Good. She was gone before he could even finish. Night. Well, that was weird. He wondered if he'd said something to upset her. But he really hadn't said anything before he noticed her looking at him. A lopsided grin appeared on his face. Maybe she was staring at him because she thought he was attractive. He chuckled bitterly. Yeah, that would be the day. As if a girl as smart, talented and beautiful as Temari would ever. Had he said beautiful? Well, thinking about it now, sure she was pretty, and had one killer body. Ah, damn it. Naruto cursed as softly as possible and bopped himself over the head. Now I'm thinking weird things about Temari Nichan. Stupid Gaara and his stupid jutsu. He gave a disheartened sigh. And besides, even if she was easily as pretty as any other girl he'd ever really known, Sakura included, and even if she was nice and smart and a really talented shinobi, it wasn't like he really even knew her that well. If there really was any sort of real attraction to her that hadn't been brought up by sort of seeing her naked, even if it wasn't her, he knew that the only other reason for it was because she was the one and only girl his age that seemed to enjoy being around him and didn't treat him like a disease-infected rat. If any other girl ever acted that way around him besides Temari, he was certain he'd feel the exact same way about her, too. And then, of course, the only reason that Temari didn't treat him like everyone else was because she didn't know his secret yet. Baki and the Cage might have been the exceptions, but if Temari or either of the others learned that he had a bloodthirsty demon living inside him, well. This was depressing. Slowly, he got to his feet and made his way back to his tent, hoping to lose his worries in the comfort of sleep. He just had to get his mind back on the mission and away from thoughts about Temari. But sadly, it was near impossible to control your own dreams, and Naruto's night was spent with many visions of evil demon foxes and a young, blonde kunoichi. The team was up and moving, much to both Naruto and Kankuro's chagrin, before the sun came up. They had been traveling for almost 2 days now and were nearing the edge of the desert, and Baki had informed them that if they made good time, they could be in aim before sunrise. It turned out to be a rather difficult 2 hours for Temari. Being the only real morning person in the group, having to travel with a grumpy Naruto and Kankuro, a brooding Baki, and a normal Gaara certainly was trying on the nerves. The desert was soon left behind and it wasn't long before a large forest came into view. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, the group began feeling a steady increase of raindrops. Naruto didn't really mind, though he quickly wished that he had brought an umbrella with him, because it only took about 2 minutes before he was soaked to the bone. He glanced at the others. Temari was using her giant fan as a substitute umbrella. Kankuro had pulled out a large rain hat over his black hood and kept his head bowed down. Probably didn't want his makeup to run, Naruto surmised with a weak smirk. Baki walked on unfazed, while Gaara formed a small roof of sand above him, though Naruto couldn't help but notice the small amount of strain on the redhead's face as he walked. Intrigued, he moved next to Temari. "What's up with Gaara?" he whispered. Temari glanced back nervously at her brother, but relaxed a bit in understanding. Gaara doesn't like water. When his sand gets wet, it becomes harder for him to manipulate. He'll probably be grumpy for the rest of the day, so better give him his space. Gotcha, Naruto said with a nod. They walked a few more steps when Temari became wary that Naruto was still walking extremely close to her, close enough that their arms began brushing together as they moved. She felt like it shouldn't have been such a big deal, but after the whole ordeal from the night before it was making her a bit flustered. "Nah, Naruto," she said, mentally cursing herself for having the audacity to stutter. "What are you doing?" "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean that you seem to be moving rather close to me, don't you think?" Naruto blinked, then gave her a sheepish grin. "Oh, well it's dry under here. I didn't think you'd mind." Temari turned stone-faced. She didn't know what she had been expecting, but now she just felt foolish for expecting whatever it was. Temari did not like to feel foolish. Especially not 2 times in less than a day by the same person. Giving the boy a small shove, she took a good amount of satisfaction in watching him slip on the wet ground and fall on his butt into a shallow puddle of muddy water. Springing back to his feet, Naruto glared at the kunoichi. What the heck was that for? he demanded. Temari just smirked and stuck her tongue out at him, then turned and walked on, satisfied that justice had been served. Naruto's glare faded away. Damn, he muttered. Now my new clothes are muddy. At least the rain'll clean 'em, I guess. He sighed, wondering if all women were as hard to figure out as Temari was. God, he hoped not. 9 a.m. found Team Baki being welcomed into the modestly sized building of the lead shinobi of AIM. And it had rained the entire time. Fortunately for Naruto, about 20 minutes of whining, pleading and bribing finally wore Temari down enough to allow him back under her fan provided he kept as much distance from her as possible, which gave him time to dry off before meeting with the AIM representatives. As they entered the gates, they were greeted by a man and woman, both with long black hair and looking to be in their mid-20s. They both held wide, black umbrellas over their heads and were dressed in dark gray cloaks over greenish-brown pants. A weapon was visible hanging from both of their waists, from the man's, a kodachi. From the woman's, a kusarigama. Greetings, I am Baki, the Junin began, speaking for the first time in hours. My team and I have come in accordance with your leader to assist you in your conflict with Kusagaker. Well met, the woman said with a small bow. My name is Yamane Kasumi. This, she gestured to the man next to her, is my brother, Kazuya. We welcome you to AIM and are very. I trust that there will be more of you coming. The man, Kazuya, interrupted. The man's vicious tone caught the Sunanin by surprise. I'm afraid not, Baki told them. We are all that have been sent. Kazuya snorted in disgust. How typical of one of the Big Five. The strongest nations in the world, but when a lesser country asks for help with a war, they send in a Junin and 4 children. He didn't even acknowledge the glares he received from Naruto, Kankuro and Temari as he turned to walk away. Brother, Kasumi said sternly. Hey, Naruto shouted, taking a few steps forward. So what if we're kids? Our team can handle anything. Kazuya paused in mid-step, then without warning flung his umbrella into the air. Yorizuhari no aim. Naruto's eyes widened as the umbrella opened at the peak of its ascent, then began spewing out hundreds of long, thin needles in his direction. Thinking quicker than he'd ever thought before, he formed a set of seals and drove his fist into the ground. Tatsumaki Shoheki. A modest wind instantly kicked up around him. It wasn't nearly as fierce as the ones Temari had done, but it was enough to do the trick of keeping the needles away from him. His grin of triumph didn't last, however, as Kazuya blew right through the small twister and cracked him between the eyes with the sheath of his sword. He landed hard on his back at the feet of his teammates. Kazuya snorted again, leveling a hard glare toward the fallen boy. A word of advice, Greenhorn, someone as weak as you shouldn't have such a big mouth. It could get you killed one day. With that, he turned and walked back into the village. Naruto slowly sat up, rubbing his head and glaring daggers at the man's back. Temari knelt down next to him and examined his head. You okay? Yeah, he answered distractedly. The blow to his pride had hurt more than the blow to his head. Please excuse my brother's actions, Kasumi said with another bow. I'm afraid he's been under a lot of stress in the last few weeks. Apologies are not necessary, Baki said calmly. Kasumi nodded. Then if you will please follow me, we will brief you on your mission at Lord Masamuri-sama's mansion. The team began following the girl when Naruto felt Baki's hand on his shoulder. Uzumaki, he said softly. I realize that this is your first mission, but you cannot provoke the people who employ us. But he's the one who started it, Naruto said defensively. You heard him, he doesn't think we're good enough. That may be the case, but we are still here to do their bidding. As long as this mission continues, we are their tools, and they are allowed to treat and implement us as they see fit. That is the life of a shinobi. Naruto silently frowned. He did remember something like that being said back in Iruka-sensei's classes, but he still didn't like it. Yeah well, even if we are just tools to them, we're still humans, too. They should at least treat us like we are. Baki shook his head and began walking to catch up with the others. You've still got a lot to learn, Uzumaki. Kazuya was halfway back to the mansion when he became aware of a slight stinging in his arm. He absently reached up with his left hand to rub it, but was surprised to pull his hand away sticky with blood. He pulled at his sleeve and revealed a shallow, 2-inch long cut just below his shoulder. What is this? He wondered aloud. That greenhorn's jutsu wasn't strong enough to cut me, and I know he never touched me himself. But I didn't see any of his teammates move either. Who the hell wounded me then? He stared at the cut for a few more seconds before he noticed his sister and the Suna ninja approaching behind him. Scowling, he skulked onward without giving any of them a second glance. At the same time that the Suna team arrived in AIM, Team Guy had also arrived in Kusa. This place is beautiful, Tenten said in awe as they glanced around at all the tall grasses and brightly colored flowers that covered the grounds that they were walking by. Yosh, this land is most certainly enjoying its own springtime of youth, is it not, Guy-sensei? Indeed it is, Lee. And what say you, Neji? Doesn't the brilliant sight make you want to shout out in joy of being alive? Meh, the prodigy grunted disinterestedly. The group made their way through the lively village until they came upon the manor of the village leader. It wasn't anything compared in size to the Hokage's tower, but it was still the largest building in the village. At the entrance, they were met by an elderly man dressed in thick gray robes and supporting himself on a long oak walking stick. Welcome friends, welcome, he greeted cheerfully. So you are the lot who have come to assist us, are you? Yes, Guy stated. My youthful students and I have come to bring peace back to the lands of Kusa and AIM. Wonderful. Takara-sama will be most pleased, I'm sure. I am Halleck, minister and advisor to Takara-sama. If you would follow me, I will take you to him. He led them into the manor, where they were greeted by a portly, balding man in regal purple robes. Halleck moved next to the man and slowly crouched down into a sitting position. Gentlemen, and lady, I present to you the daimyo of Kusagaker, Shigeta Takara. Takara-sama, these are the shinobi of Konoha that you requested. The daimyo gave a deep belly laugh. Excellent, I've been anxiously awaiting your arrival since yesterday. I felt for sure that you wouldn't make it here in time, but it seems I've worried for nothing, doesn't it? He laughed loudly again. Please my guests, make yourselves comfortable. I would love to offer up a banquet for all of you, but I'm afraid our time is quite limited, so we really must get down to business. Perhaps something to drink, though. Not waiting for a response, he clapped his hands loudly. Mina-chan, some refreshment for our guests. Yes sir. A voice called back from another room. Such a good girl, she is, he said lovingly. Now then, have a seat and we can begin. He's a lively one, isn't he? Tenten muttered under her breath. He is filled with the passion of youth, Lee agreed. Right then, the large man said. He stopped and frowned when he saw that Neji had remained standing while everyone else had sat. Something wrong, boy. Neji crossed his arms and gave the Kusa men an accusing glare. Sorry sir, I just find it difficult to relax when there are so many armed men hiding in the same room as I. Takara's eyes widened, as did Halleck's. The daimyo chuckled lightly. You're quite the observant one, aren't you, Sonny? Well, if you already know they're here, I suppose they might as well come out and say, hi. 2 shinobi instantly fell from the corners of the ceiling, while 3 more moved out from behind the large pillars next to Takara. All of them gripped kunai in their hands and began to encircle the Konoha team. Tenten and Lee jumped to their feet. Wow, betrayed before we even get started, the kunoichi said dully. That's a first. Attack. Takara shouted. The 5 shinobi did just that. The first didn't even get an opportunity to strike before being sent into the far end wall by a fierce kick from Lee. The second one to attack the spandex-clad boy managed to swing his weapon twice before finding himself planted head first into the ceiling courtesy of an uppercut. At the same time, Neji was deftly avoiding the wild swings and stabs from two other attackers, before sending a chakra-enhanced palm thrust into one of their chests, and then into the others, leaving them both groaning in pain on the floor. The final attacker targeted Tenten, who parried every strike he threw at her. The man reared back for an full-powered stab, and ended up with nothing but air as the girl flipped up and behind him, giving him a hard kick to the back. As he stumbled to the floor, she grabbed a handful of her own kunai and, with a flick of her wrists, pinned him to the ground. The entire exchange took exactly 8 seconds. Guy beamed proudly at his team's display of skill. As expected of my youthful children. Takara and Halleck looked around at their fallen soldiers in shock. But as the three genin turned their attention back to them, their anger was dissolved as Takara broke into another fit of bellowhouse laughter. Brilliant, he shouted happily. Splendid. Superb. I knew that calling on Konoha for help was the best choice. Anyo, Tenten said, scratching the side of her head in puzzlement. Please forgive me, my friends, Halleck spoke. But that was just to test your abilities. When I saw how young you three were, I thought the Hokage had gone mad, sending a group of hatchlings on a mission to prevent a war. But you've all shown that you're very capable of assisting our cause. Of course, those men that you fought were only genin, like yourselves, but I didn't expect them to fall so quickly. It seems their instructors are going to have to work them harder if they hope to succeed in the Chunin exams. I hope there are no ill feelings for the trickery. The three genin looked uncertain. They glanced at Guy, to see what he was thinking. The Junin sat lost in thought for a few seconds, then flashed them his patented, nice guy pose. That was enough for Lee. If Guy-sensei still trusts them, then I shall trust them as well. Neither Tenten nor Neji were half as convinced, but arguing at this point wouldn't help anything, so they decided to go along with their teammates. Neji did, however, keep his Byakugan activated. Allow us to explain the situation that we're now facing, Kasumi began once everyone had settled into the room. Except for Kazuya, the others were all seated at a small table in the center of the medium-sized kusal room. The AIM nin chose instead to stand off in the corner of the room, leaning against the wall and not really looking at anyone. Excuse me, Kankuro raised his hand. Shouldn't someone else be here for this? The AIM siblings glanced at each other, but Kazuya seemed to understand first. Masamuri-sama. Kasumi nodded in affirmation. Masamuri-sama is incapacitated at the moment. The two of us have been assigned to brief you of your mission in his stead. That seemed to satisfy Kankuro, and he sat back and made himself comfortable. Now, the kunoichi began again. This whole problem started exactly 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago a few of my men, who were stationed in a small village along the border between us and Omegakure, came back to me with important news. Takara explained. The members of Team Guy were knelt down before him again, listening intently, though remained prepared for any more tests that might appear. Apparently, they had overheard an old man running around the village claiming to have discovered gold a few miles to the south of them. The men went to see for themselves, and after some searching, found the area that the man had described. They dug for a while, and ended up returning with close to a pound of pure gold. By their calculations, the vein of gold in that area could easily stretch for miles in all directions. Naturally, we immediately sent out workers to begin excavating it, but we ran into a problem. By the time our men got to the site to begin their digging, they found men from Kusa trying to do the same. Baki sighed inwardly. He could already figure out what this was leading up to. The gold was discovered almost exactly on the boundary line between AIM and Kusa. Fighting quickly broke out between the two sides, and we've been at a standoff over it since then, Kasumi continued. So this is all a big squabble over who should rightfully have the gold? Kankuro asked. It's not some measly little squabble, Kazuya sneered. It's a serious matter, though I wouldn't expect any of you to understand that. Brother, Kasumi said with a firm glare. Kazuya just huffed, but stayed silent. He is right, though, the girl said, turning back to the group. That gold is very important to the land of Aim. The land of Kusa has been in a slump as of late, Halleck informed them, taking up there the daimyo had left off. Our main sources of income come from shinobi jobs and exporting vegetation to the lands of Suna, Iwa and even Kumo. However, missions have been few and far between in the last few months, and a longer than average winter season has put a hampering on our crops this year. If we had this gold, Takara continued, we wouldn't have to worry about any further money problems for a very long time. However, it would seem that AIM desires it just as much as we. If that is the case, Lee said, then could you not simply split the gold with AIM? Surely there is enough that could keep both of your countries in high financial support. Takara chuckled. Yes, we thought so too, and at first we believed that AIM would be willing to compromise as well, but we arranged a peace meeting to discuss how we would divide the gold 2 weeks ago. There was a lot of tension, and we knew that Kusa didn't trust us to keep our word. Their daimyo, Shigeta Takara, didn't even come to the negotiations. After some initial bickering, we eventually believed that we had come to an official agreement. But then things started going wrong. Like what? Naruto questioned. Like one of their representatives suddenly dying, Kazuya said in a dry tone. What? The blonde boy said in shock. Yes, Kasumi confirmed. Halfway through the meeting, one of the Kusa men suddenly began coughing blood, and fell over dead just seconds later. Was it some type of assassination? Temari asked. No, not by any of our men, at least. But as you can imagine, Kusa believed otherwise. They called off all talks of peace and were ready to fight us for possession of the gold. Masamuri-sama did all he could to regain their trust, sending them peace offerings every day for the next 5 days. Kusa eventually relented, and agreed to meet again for more talk. We met again 1 week after the first. I had already been fearful of an attack on my life before, so I stayed behind once again, but sent several of our most talented shinobi along with our mediators to ensure that another tragedy didn't happen. Did it? Neji asked. In a sense, yes, the daimyo answered. But this time it was the Omegakure leader Masamuri who was suddenly stricken with a sickness. Sickness? Lee repeated. Maybe, though the general thought at the time was poison. AIM accused us of seeking vengeance for what happened the week before, though I can assure you, just as I assured them, that none of my men had anything to do with it. Halleck was there himself, and he's my right-hand man. He never would have allowed anything so reckless to happen during such a delicate time. The wizened, old man nodded at the statement. Masamuri looked completely fine when he first showed up at the meeting, but shortly after arriving, I noticed he started to grow pale. His breathing became labored and he finally collapsed. So did Masamuri-san. No, luckily, Kazuya said, cutting Temari off. He's still alive, but he has yet to recover from the incident. Our medic nins and doctors spent hours examining him, but found no traces of poison or even any sort of virus or disease in Masamuri-sama's body. They finally concluded that he had merely collapsed due to a build-up of stress. We gave our apologies to Kusa for our accusations, and we have both agreed to give one more chance to a treaty. And that is where we sit right now, Halleck said. Today will be our 3rd meeting with AIM, and that is the reason that you have been hired. You want us to oversee the meeting with you? Tenten guessed. Correct, the old man said. We still can't rule out the possibility that this is all a big scheme by AIM to get all the gold for themselves. Unfortunately, there's also the possibility that there is another outside party who also knows about the treasure, and is using these meetings as a way to stir up dissension between our 2 countries for their own gain. Therefore, while this meeting is going on, we will need you 4 to be vigilant. You will be responsible for spotting anything even remotely suspicious that could lead to another assassination attempt. If this meeting doesn't go as planned, there will be no further peace talks, and we will have no choice but to use force against AIM. Yosh. Fear not, Takara-sama, Guy shouted with enthusiasm. My bright, Youthful students and I shall see to it that no war will befall your beautiful country, and if we fail, then we shall all run 1,000 laps around your village. Don't make promises for us. Tenten berated him. Takara laughed again. Well, I don't believe something so strenuous will be necessary, but I'm most thankful that we have your support. Halleck stood back up, wobbling slightly with his cane. We leave for the border in 2 hours. Please use this time to prepare yourselves. Team Baki had left the room, and made their way outside to see that the rain had finally stopped. Kankuro was the first to speak. So basically, the only reason we're really here is to be watchdogs. Correct, Baki said, but there's something more to this mission than what we've been told. You think that they're keeping something from us? Temari asked. Yes, though I don't know what it might be. It could be the work of another country, you know. Kankuro added. Both sides get attacked, war breaks out, whoever it is comes in and sweeps the whole place clean in the end. Baki hummed softly. He turned to the other members of his team, who had yet to speak their opinions. He knew that Gaara wouldn't, but Naruto. Uzumaki. The boy's head shot up at hearing his name. Anything to add? Naruto rubbed his chin, looking to be deep in thought. All I know for sure is that Kazuya guy is a jerk and I'd love to punch him in the face. I don't trust him at all. Baki rolled his eyes. Not groundbreaking, but something that he might have come to expect from Naruto. We'll be leaving soon, so don't wander far, he told them. We can't afford mistakes in this mission. Those kids look like they could be a problem. I'm not worried. Perhaps you should be. Who knows what the consequences could be if they did something to screw this up? Yes, you don't have to remind me. I'm well aware of how delicate this is. Just stay on guard, give warning to the men, and be prepared to deal with them when the time comes. Of course.